Welcome back, everybody. It is Monday, April 13th, 2026. We left off on Luke 19, verse 28, and here we go. And when he had said these things, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. When he drew near to Bethphage and Bethany, at the mount that is called Olivet, he sent two of the disciples, saying, "Go into the village in front of you, where on entering you will find a colt tied, on which no one has ever yet sat. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' you shall say this, 'The Lord has need of it.'" So those who were sent went away and found it, just as he had told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owner said to them, "Why are you untying the colt?" And they said, "The Lord has need of it." And they brought it to Jesus. And, well, hold on a sec. What is the purpose of Luke 19? (33 through 34). In Luke 19:33 through 34, we see a specific moment during the preparations for Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Reading, and as they were untying the colt, its owner said to them, "Why are you untying the colt?" And they said, "The Lord has need of it." While these verses may seem like a minor logistical detail, they serve several significant purposes within the gospel narrative. Fulfillment of prophecy. Oh, pardon me. The primary purpose of this entire sequence is to fulfill the prophecy found in Zechariah 9:9, which predicted that the king of Israel would come humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Okay. By detailing the specific interaction with the owners, Luke emphasizes that Jesus is intentionally and precisely fulfilling messianic expectations. Demonstrations of Jesus' divine authority. The interaction highlights Jesus' sovereignty and foreknowledge. Earlier in the chapter, Jesus tells his disciples exactly where they will find the colt and exactly what the owners will say. The phrase, "The Lord has need of it," acts as a divine password. It suggests that either Jesus had made prior arrangements with these owners, or, more likely in the theological context, that his authority as Lord, Kyrios, was sufficient to compel their cooperation. So, yeah, okay, so this is interesting. Okay, what do I want to ask here? So, why is it that in some situations, Jesus is willing to, I'll say for lack of a better term, I mean no disrespect, bend wills, whereas in other situations, free will reigns. This tension between divine sovereignty and human free will is one of the most debated topics in theology. When looking at the Gospels, it often seems like Jesus operates on two different tracks. The distinction usually comes down to the nature of the event, whether it is a milestone in the redemptive plan or an invitation to personal relationship. Oh, okay, I see what they're saying. And I guess the point too is, humans do have free will, but so does God. So there's that too. So we don't need to read through all that. I was just curious what the prevailing sentiment might be. Okay, and as he rode along, oh no. Verse 35. And they brought it to Jesus, and throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. And as he rode along, they spread their cloaks on the road. As he was drawing near, already on the way down the Mount of Olives, The whole multitude of his disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." And some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." He answered, "I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out." Dang. What does that mean? So explain Luke 19. Does that? I guess that means all creation worships him. Luke 19:40. In the ESV, Luke 19:40 reads, "He answered, I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out." This verse occurs during the triumphal entry, where a large crowd of disciples is loudly praising Jesus as he enters Jerusalem. When the Pharisees asked Jesus to rebuke his followers for their blasphemous, in quotes, claims, Jesus responds with this striking metaphor. Here is a breakdown of the meaning and the context. First, the necessity of witness. The primary meaning is that the truth of who Jesus is, the King and Messiah, is so fundamental to reality that it must be declared. Jesus is suggesting that the praise isn't just a choice made by the crowd. It is an appropriate and necessary response to the moment. If humans refuse to acknowledge the Creator, the physical creation itself will step in to fill the void. Dang. Creation's connection to the Creator. Creation's connection to the Creator. This imagery draws on a common biblical theme, that all of nature is under God's authority and testifies to his glory. Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God. Habakkuk, I've never heard of that book. Habakkuk 2:11, this verse actually uses similar imagery in a context of judgment, saying, "For the stone will cry out from the wall." Jesus elevates his own identity here. By saying the stones would cry out for him, he is claiming a status that warrants a cosmic response, not just a human one. A rebuke to the religious leaders. The Pharisees were trying to maintain order and avoid a Roman crackdown or what they perceived as heresy. Jesus' response is a sharp irony. He is telling these spiritual experts that they are more spiritually dead than inanimate rocks. Even a stone has more sense than a leader who witnesses the Messiah and remains silent or oppositional. And divine sovereignty. The verse reinforces the idea that God's purposes cannot be thwarted, whether through the mouths of shouting disciples or through miraculous signs in nature. The arrival of the King will be heralded. It suggests that the hour of his glorification had come, and nothing, not even the silence of his followers, could stop the truth from being shouted. Dang. Okay. Verse 41. And when he drew near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, "Would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace. But now they are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you, and they will not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation." What does that mean? It's another, Explain Luke 19. I don't think this was in the other Gospels, 42, or it was worded differently, 42 through 44. In Luke 19, 42 through 44, Jesus is approaching Jerusalem for his triumphal entry. However, instead of a celebration, this moment is marked by Jesus weeping over the city. These verses contain a chilling prophecy about the destruction of Jerusalem, which historically occurred in 70 AD. The missed opportunity. Would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. Jesus expresses deep grief because the people of Jerusalem, the religious and political center of Israel, did not recognize the things that make for peace. The irony of the name, Jerusalem literally means city of peace. Wow, I didn't know that. The spiritual blindness. They were looking for a military Messiah to overthrow Rome, but Jesus came to bring peace between God and man. Because they rejected the spiritual peace he offered, they ensured their physical destruction. Wait, they were looking for a military Messiah to overthrow Rome, but Jesus came to bring peace between God and man. Oh, pardon me. Because they rejected the spiritual peace he offered, they ensured their physical destruction. Okay, got it. The hiding. The phrase hidden from your eyes suggests a judicial hardening. Because the city repeatedly rejected God's messengers, they reached a point where they could no longer see the truth. And the graphic prophecy. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will cast up a bank around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and dash you to the ground, you and your children within you, and they will not leave one stone upon another in you. This is a remarkably accurate description of a Roman siege. Roughly 40 years after Jesus spoke these words, the Roman general Titus did exactly this. Okay. The reason for judgment, because you did not know the time of your visitation. This is the why behind the tragedy. The word visitation in Greek, episkope, refers to a time when God draws near to inspect, judge, or save. The arrival of the king, God had visited his people in the person of Jesus Christ, but they treated him as a commoner or a criminal rather than their savior. Accountability. Jesus holds the city accountable for not recognizing the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies happening right in front of them. All right, verse 45. And he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold, saying to them, "It is written, my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it into a den of robbers." And he was teaching daily in the temple. The chief priest and the scribes and the principal men of the people were seeking to destroy him, but they did not find anything they could do, for all the people were hanging on his words. Okay, Luke 20, verse 1. One day, as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel, the chief priest and the scribes with the elders came up and said to him, "Tell us by what authority you do these things, or who it is that gave you this authority." He answered them, I also will ask you a question. Now tell me, was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? And they discussed it with one another, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, why did you not believe him? But if we say from man, all the people will stone us to death, for they are convinced that John was a prophet. So they answered that they did not know where it came from. And Jesus said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Oh, man. And he began to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard and let it out to tenants and went into another country for a long while. When the time came, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent another servant, but they also beat and treated him shamefully and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent yet a third. This one also they wounded and cast out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, what shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Perhaps they will respect him. But when the tenants saw him, they said to themselves, This is the heir. Let us kill him, so that the inheritance may be ours. Ours? Ours. And they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When they heard this, they said, Surely not. But he looked directly at them and said, What then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. What does that mean? Explain. Luke 20, verse 18. In Luke 20:18, Jesus concludes the parable of the wicked tenants with a striking dual-edged warning. To understand the verse, it is helpful to look at the text first. It reads, Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. The context. The rejected cornerstone. Just before this verse, Jesus quotes Psalm 118:22, identifying himself as the stone that the builders rejected, which has become the cornerstone. He is speaking to the religious leaders, i.e., the builders, who are plotting to kill him. In this metaphor, Jesus is the stone. The verse describes two ways people interact with that stone, both of which result in judgment for those who reject him. Falling on the stone, broken to pieces, this describes someone who stumbles over Jesus. In the New Testament, Jesus is often called a stumbling block to those who expect a different kind of Messiah or refuse to humble themselves. The imagery. If you trip over a massive, immovable rock, you are the one who gets hurt, not the rock. The meaning. Resisting or rejecting Christ leads to spiritual ruin. Some commentators also see a glimmer of brokenness here that leads to repentance, i.e. being broken of pride. But in the immediate context of this parable, it primarily signifies the self-inflicted damage of unbelief. Dang, the self-inflicted damage of unbelief. The stone falling on you, crushed. This is a much more severe image of final active judgment. The imagery. This likely alludes to Daniel 2:34 through 35 and Daniel 44 through 45, where a stone cut out by no human hand falls upon the kingdoms of the world and shatters them to dust. Well, the meaning, while falling on the stone represents the current consequences of rejecting Jesus, the stone falling on you represents the finality of God's judgment. To those who persistently oppose him, Christ becomes the instrument of their total destruction. It's a choice now. It won't be a choice at the end. Verse 19, the scribes and the chief priests sought to lay hands on him at that very hour, for they perceived that he had told this parable against them, but they feared the people. So they watched him and sent spies, who pretended to be sincere, that they might catch him in something he said, so as to deliver him up to the authority and jurisdiction of the governor. So they asked him, Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly, and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not? But he perceived their craftiness and said to them, Show me a denarius, which was their form of currency. Show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have? They said, Caesar's. He said to them, Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they were not able in the presence of the people to catch him in what he said, but marveling at his answer, they became silent. I love that part. That's one of the most badass things that Jesus said in the Bible. Verse 27, there came to him some Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection. Those who deny that there is a resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, having a wife but no children, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first took a wife and died without children. And the second and the third took her, and likewise all 7 left no children and died. Afterward, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had her as wife. They really thought they were slick with this one. And Jesus said to them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and to the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die anymore, because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. But that the dead are raised, even Moses showed in the passage about the bush, where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. Now he is not God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. So, okay, this is always an interesting one too. In Luke 20:34 through 38, is this to mean we will not have memory of our lives on earth once we enter heaven? Obviously, this no one really knows, but I'm curious what the consensus is. Looking at, I would assume not, but you never know. Looking at Luke 20:34 through 38, Jesus is specifically addressing a trick question from the Sadducees about marriage and resurrection. While the passage describes a significant change in human nature, it doesn't imply a memory wipe of our earthly lives. Here's a breakdown of what the text actually says and how it's generally understood, which we just read it, so I won't read that, but change of status, not loss of identity. Jesus is arguing that the social structures of this age, like marriage, do not carry over because they are no longer necessary. In the resurrection, people cannot die anymore and are equal to angels. Marriage serves earthly purposes, procreation and companionship in a world of mortality. In that age, the need for procreation vanishes. This suggests a change in relationship status, not a deletion of the history you shared with your spouse or family. That's true. I agree. I still don't think we'll carry our memories, though. God of the living. In verse 38, Jesus says, now he is not God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. By naming Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jesus implies they still exist as distinct individuals. That's a good point. Got me there. By naming Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jesus implies they still exist as distinct individuals. Wow, okay, I never thought of it that way. If these patriarchs lost their memories, they would no longer truly be Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in any meaningful sense. Their identity is rooted in their history and the covenants God made with them. Man, slap me up. Okay, Gemini. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay. Okay, let's read these two. Why memory is likely retained. While this specific passage focuses on marriage, other parts of the New Testament suggest that memory remains intact. The Transfiguration. When Moses and Elijah appear with Jesus, Matthew 17, they are recognizable and discuss Jesus' upcoming departure in Jerusalem. They are clearly aware of the earthly events and their own roles in history. This is probably the best point, and we just read this, so I should have known better. The rich man and Lazarus. In Luke 16:19 through 31, The rich man in the afterlife distinctly remembers his 5 brothers who are still alive and expresses concern for them. Yeah, yeah. That's probably the best. Yeah, it's the best example. He even remembers Lazarus and calls out to Abraham. So, yeah, he clearly had his memory. The concept of account. Biblical theology often mentions giving an account of one's life. 2 Corinthians 5:10. It's difficult to give an account of a life you don't remember. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Slap me up. You got me. All right. Which is interesting too, right? Because so the way heaven is described, there will be no more pain, no more suffering, but we'll still have our memories, which to me just makes it all the more, I suppose, even sweeter, but also I just can't even imagine that. I mean, think of all the bad junk you've been through that I've been through. Imagine being able to fully remember all these things, but also all sorrow, pain, all that stuff will just be gone. Pretty crazy. Okay, whose son is the Christ? Verse 41. But he said to them, how can they say that the Christ is David's son? For David himself... Wait, did I skip? I did. I skipped a small part. Verse 39. Then some of the scribes answered, Teacher, you have spoken well, for they no longer dared to ask him any question. But he said to them, how can they say that the Christ is David's son? For David himself says in the book of Psalms, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. David thus calls him Lord, so how is he his son? And in the hearing of all the people, he said to his disciples, beware of the scribes, who like to walk around in long robes and love greetings in the marketplaces, and the best seats in the synagogues, and the places of honor at feast, who devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation. Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box, and he saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. And he said, truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on. And while some were speaking of the temple, how it was adorned with the noble stones and offerings, he said, as for these things that you see, the days will come when there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. And they asked him, Teacher, when will these things be? And what will be the sign that these things are about to take place? And he said, see that you are not led astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is at hand. Do not go after them. And when you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once. Then he said to them, nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, and in various places famines and pestilences. I always forget what that... I know what a famine, like a food shortage, but what is a pestilence? What is a pestilence? In historical and biblical context, a pestilence is a fatal epidemic disease that spreads quickly and causes widespread death. While the word sounds archaic today, it was once the standard way to describe what we now call a plague or a pandemic. Yeah. Pretty crazy. I mean, we've had, the tsunamis and the pandemic and famines, not here in America, but it's crazy how all this stuff, you just never know. As wicked as things are, I mean, we could certainly be nearing the end. I hope so. And there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. But before all this, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons. And you will be brought before kings and governors for my name's sake. This will be your opportunity to bear witness. Settle it therefore in your minds not to meditate beforehand how to answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and some of you they will put to death. You will be hated by all for my name's sake, but not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your lives. All right. We've hit our 30-minute mark, so we're going to pick it up tomorrow night on Luke 21, verse 20. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to sub, share it with a friend. God bless you guys, and good night.